So welcome to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel. My name's Connor. I'm joined today by Michael Grant. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm good, and thanks for having me, Connor.
Absolutely. And I suppose like how have things been for you in your part of the world over the past 2 or so years, I guess?
Well, aside from the fact that I apparently now live in a lunatic asylum,
Mm,
it seems to maybe getting out of the worst of it. We're not entirely sure if we're getting out of the worst of it. Maybe
right.
hopeful. But
Hmm.
aside from politics, everything's great. I mean, I I have zero complaints about my life. Let me put it that way.
Mm, yeah.
That I've gotten this far with this little effort is really, it ought to be a crime.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you're obviously a very successful author, and I know you've spoken in the past. Like I personally like read about you kind of becoming a writer like later in life, so or like relatively later in life. And I suppose like could you
Yeah.
discuss like your background and kind of how you found yourself on the path to becoming an author?
Yeah, well, my path is not like anybody else's. Trust me
Right.
on that.
Mm,
So I'll give you the short version. I was actually born in LA, although I haven't spent much of my life here. My
mm,
mother was 16 when she had me. She'd been
sure.
married at 14 over the border in Mexico,
Mm,
which is either a quirky story or a story
mm,
of statutory rape, one of the two. In
right.
any case, she had me when she was 16. We were poor. And my dad, who adopted me when I was 4, my birth father disappeared. I was adopted,
Mm,
married my mother and adopted me when I
mm,
was 4. He was a soldier, but a very low ranking enlisted man at that point. So still, we were broke all the time. And later on, he did become an officer, a warrant officer, and life got a little easier, I think, economically. But soon after that, I was out of the house. I dropped out of school when I was 16, one day into 11th grade
mm,
because um, uh, because somebody told me to go out of a door and in another door.
right.
So naturally, I dropped out of school because honestly, what else are you going to do
Mm,
with that kind of a terrifying provocation? So no, I was always a new kid in school. So I mean, we moved
yeah.
around a lot. So I think once I went to school after being, followed in the same grade, but I think only for half a year. Um, so by the time I was got through 10th grade, and it was just like, this is a fucking waste of my life.
Mm,
Why am I doing this? I can beat tests. I'm really good with tests for some bizarre
mm,
reason. I got some like weird superpower with tests. So I
mm,
can always take the test and just basically not pay attention to anything else, which was kind of silly. But it was probably a skill I learned in France because I was in French school for 3 years when
yeah.
I was a kid when we were stationed over there. And it was very test centric. So I got used to just, oh, well, just beat the test and you're good. Um, did briefly attend college,
Mm,
very briefly, mostly to get high and chase girls,
mm,
young women, obviously. I don't mean
mm,
girls.
mm.
Um, then dropped out of that pretty quickly. Went into various different jobs, mostly restaurant work, uh,
Right.
assistant manager kind of thing, night manager, waiter,
Mm,
a lot of waiting tables. Then I decided I would go into a life of crime. Uh,
right.
Carried out 2 burglaries of
Mm,
24-hour restaurants, cut my way in through the roof and emptied
mm,
out the safe. Got arrested, spent 11 days in jail, decided I didn't like that very much. And when I got bailed out, I decided, well, that's it. Fuck that. I'm out of here. And so I jumped bail. And for the next 22 years, I was on the run. But in an incredible stroke of luck that was I can't explain it to this day. But I ran from California, hitchhiked actually, ended up in
mm,
Austin, Texas, living under a freeway for a while because I was broke. Got a job waiting tables, got a shitty apartment. And then
mm,
one day coming home to my apartment, actually after having just been on let's call it a date with another
mm,
woman, saw this woman in a window in the apartment next to mine and just decided I had to meet her. And went over to her apartment, which is really not remotely typical for me. Went and tried to knock on the door, but she was on the fucking phone.
mm,
So I went had to go back to my apartment and sit there and stew for a while, think about it, and back down the stairs and then up her stairs, and she's still on the phone. This goes on 4 times. Finally, I knocked on her door, borrowed a can opener. Long story short, asked her out for a beer.
mm,
She, like an idiot, said sure. And we had a nice talk and kissed. And then the next day we moved in together. And we've been together for, it'll be 44 years tomorrow, actually.
Wow.
And that was Catherine, of course. And at the time, neither of us was remotely close to having decided what we're going to do when we grew up. She was just graduating from the University of Texas. And like I said, I was, a flake. And of course, I immediately told her everything about me. I didn't like deceive her and go, I'm a nice, normal, stable person. I was like, no, I'm a mess. I'm in trouble with the law and living under an alias. You're gonna have to get used to calling me by various names as we move around. So for the next about 10 years after that, we did various low-end jobs because she wasn't criminal, but she was in her own way as messed up as I was. Had some really severe obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, all the usual stuff. Much improved after medication, but Prozac hadn't been invented yet. So we were very poor and mostly waited tables, and ended up at one point in Cape Cod, and where we were cleaning toilets. We were cleaning people's homes during the day and offices at night. And by this time I'm 34 and I think she was 32. And she said, I'm not really happy with this. I said, wow, it's hard to believe you're not happy with a job cleaning toilets all day. And she said, I think we should get careers and think about having kids. So I thought the easier of those to deal with was getting a career. So I said, well, what career? She said, I think we should write. And up to that point, the only thing we'd written, I think we'd started writing personality quizzes for YM magazine, which is a girls magazine, young teenager magazine. And it was just, like this, are you a bitch? Answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, it's the punchline, that kind of format. And we're getting like shit money for that. So she said, let's become writers. And in just a degree of arrogance, it's hard to justify. I said, yeah, sure, let's do that. Because neither of us had any idea what we were doing, of course. But, based on my background of 10th grade education and a lot of waiting tables and managing to get myself in all kinds of trouble, I thought, yeah, I can be a writer. Sure. What's the problem? So we wrote a Harlequin romance novel. That was our first, because it was the easiest way in. This was very much at this point, this is not about artistic expression. This was about, we got to make a living. We got to get our shit together, because the only way we get out of the trouble we're in is if we have a lot more money than we have now. So we wrote a romance novel, sold it, sold a second romance novel, and then realized they couldn't turn things around fast enough for it to be a viable way of supporting ourselves. So Catherine found a path into ghostwriting, which is where you do all the work and somebody else gets most of the money and all the credit. Fair enough. It was for Sweet Valley Twins, and we and the funny thing is, I look back and I was like arrogant from the word go. Like the first time they sent us an outline for a book, I said, well, this is shit, but let's power through it. And the second time it was like, this is even worse shit. Let's just ignore everything but the title and the concept. And pretty soon, and somehow this worked, and we became their go-to people. And eventually they stopped bothering to send us outlines and just said, hey, how about a book like about this thing, because we got a title. We're like, okay, you got a title, we'll give you a book. We did that, and we did another series called Girl Talk. Same thing. Did a lot of work for Disney books. We wrote little spin-offs of Aladdin and spin-offs of Mermaid and that kind of stuff. And then we started writing, and young adult wasn't really a thing at this point, or it was barely a thing. You'd see the occasional series come out, but there's like one called Freshman Dorm, I think, but not a lot. And the packager handled Sweet Valley for him, who was the middleman who managed Sweet Valley, basically. Said, you guys want to write young adult stuff? And we said, sure, what the fuck, why not? So we wrote this series called Ocean City, because we had lived at Ocean City, one of the many places we lived. And then that worked. We wrote the first 4 books, and the packager took it from there. And I think they went on for like another 10 books or something. God knows what they did with it. We didn't bother to read it. Then we did a thing called Boyfriends, Girlfriends, which was later renamed Making Out, which was an 8-book deal. And then they extended that beyond that. And again, hopefully they aren't out there recruiting, young Nazis or something, but So
Mm.
we don't know. It was out of our hands. And then we were working on a book, and yet our third YA series called Summer, and
Right.
starting to lose our shit, frankly. And at this point, we're living in Florida, and we're out walking the cat one night
Hmm. Yeah.
around our apartment complex in Florida, Plantation Gardens, it was called. I'm pretty
Mm.
sure they've renamed it since then.
Mm.
I hope.
Yeah.
But in any case, we were walking around, and Catherine was like, "I can't do this shit anymore. I'm just tired of writing this crappy series stuff." And I said, "Yeah, I
Mm.
know, but we're still not R.L. Stine," which was our point at that point. We wanted to be R.L. Stine because
Yeah.
R.L. Stine was God. I mean,
Mm.
we go into stores and see bookstores and see kids physically dragging their parents through the bookstore to get to Stein. They're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, we want some of that."
Very
So I
prolific.
said,
Yeah.
"Yeah, well, what would you write about? Forget the marketing, because that's always was my thing, is how do we make money?
Hmm.
How is this profitable for us?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, then, if I'm not thinking about marketing at all, I wish I could find a way to write about animals in such a way that kids were really inside the heads of animals." And I
Yeah.
said, "Oh, that's a science fiction concept. We're going to need some
Mm.
aliens." So we put together a series Bible. We called it Changelings. The word Animorphs actually came from our editor. And as soon as
Mm.
we heard it, we're like, "Yeah, obviously, duh."
Hmm.
We put together a series Bible, and I drew the pictures of Andalites and spaceships and shit in there in my
Mm.
really bad, my bad art skills, and sent it off to Scholastic and over the transom unagented, because our agent was on maternity leave at the time,
Yeah.
and said, "This is a cool idea." And they basically wrote back really fast for publishing, like 2 weeks later, go, "Yeah, it's a cool idea." And
Mm.
so I said, "Nice." They signed us for 6 books. We, of course, at that point, you've got no concept that this thing's going to go on for 63 books. You
Right.
just, so we're burning through animals like crazy, in the first
Mm.
6 books, because who knows?
Yeah.
And later regretted that, like, "Oh shit, we used up a bunch of good stuff at the start." And that worked. And that was, I think, coming out every other month, which is a pretty easy schedule. But then they went to the full year, and then they came up with the concept. This is the publisher I'm talking about. Came up with the concept of a companion series that was Megamorphs and
Mm.
Chronicles. So now
Yeah.
we're writing 14 books a year, which is insane,
Hmm.
because at this point also we had a kid right around book 11 of Animorphs,
Yeah.
which was extremely disruptive. So
Hmm.
we're writing other stuff at the same time. There was
Yeah.
another series called Marfarama, which I was writing. Catherine doesn't want to take any credit for that.
Hmm.
Barfarama, which just exactly what it sounds like. But that was
Mm.
10 books that nobody bought, except apparently in college bookstores. And we think maybe there was a connection between college kids and getting stoned and
Right.
reading Barfarama.
Yeah.
So it was perfect stoner fare as
Mm.
books go. So in any case, Animorphs was a hit, and suddenly our lives did this dramatic, it's like just spine snapping turn, where 1 minute we're poor,
Mm.
and then the next minute we've got checks for $1 million. We're like,
Right.
no idea how to respond to this. We moved to Chicago, and I used some of the money. But toward the end of Animorphs, actually,
Mm.
um, I felt secure enough at that point to reach out to lawyers, and I'm sure it's the same in the UK, but there are very different justice systems in this country for people with money, especially white people with money.
Sure. Yeah.
So I got everything dismissed. The whole thing went away.
Mm.
So then I was suddenly legal. I went down to the Mercedes dealership, because I hadn't been able to drive for 22 years,
Mm.
and bought a big, brand new black Mercedes S500,
Yeah.
and drove that around feeling pretty smug for a while.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we rode the Animorphs thing for a while. We did Everworld and Remnants, and at that point we were just like burned, and we'd written 120 books or something by that point.
Yeah.
A lot of the Animorphs toward the middle were ghosted, but they took almost as much work, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
which was our fault. I want to emphasize this.
Mm.
We paid our ghostwriters very well by the standards of the time,
Hmm.
but we didn't edit them very well because we didn't have time.
Yeah.
Because normally in publishing, you're 1 year out from pub date, from publication. So
Mm.
if I hand in a book on January 1st of year one, you're going to probably see that on the shelves January 1st of year two,
Okay.
typically. Well,
Yeah.
Animorphs was 6 months out at the best of times.
Mm.
And it was an assembly line because it wasn't like you could be a month late without fucking up everything else that came after it.
Right.
So there wasn't time to edit things. There was just time to throw a bunch of stuff out and rewrite it. It was faster to rewrite it.
Mm.
So there were some books and I was doing the editing mostly.
Yeah.
At that point, where I would get the book and get the manuscript and go, I like the first 40 pages, but the rest of it's shit. And I got it. And so it's easier, literally easier, faster to write it than it was to turn it around and try to get it from the ghostwriter. So,
Yeah.
mea culpa on that. We didn't handle that as well as we should have.
Mm.
Anyway, we quit after Animorphs, and after Animorphs, we wrote a letter to email to Gene Feivel, our head boss editor, who ran the company at that point,
Mm.
and said, "Yeah, we're done. That's it. It's like we've run out of ideas." So we took a couple of years off and did other stuff, and then after a while, we decided to get back into writing. I wrote the Gone series.
Yeah.
Catherine started writing different kinds of stuff for younger kids, and so we had been working together. Our careers kind of bifurcated, doing two separate things. I was busy, frightening teenagers, and she was busy telling animal stories to 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of where we are now.